Hey, everybody. Great to be with you this week on Live with Love. I'm Julie Roginsky here with my Lift Our Voices co-founder, Gretchen Carlson. Hey, Gretchen.
Hey, I think I'm like delayed in talking to you. Like my hand's still up to my face, but I took it down like 5 seconds ago.
Okay, weird. Well, I can see you and I can hear you. So how's your weekend?
It was good. I was traveling. As you know, we were in Seattle last week, and then I stopped off in Aspen, which was sort of nostalgic because I used to go to the music school there as a kid. So that was great. But now we're back. And you know what we're still talking about? We're still talking about Epstein and the files. Where the hell are they? The newest headline, Julie, was that yesterday, 2 of the survivors wrote a letter to the judge in New York because you remember down in Florida, the judge down there said no can do to releasing the grand jury testimony, which wasn't a surprise really, because it has to be for like the public benefit. And of course, you have to be concerned about the survivors in all of that kind of situation. But these 2 survivors wrote the judge in New York and basically said that the Trump and the Department of Justice were politicizing their experiences, and that it was difficult for them to heal because this whole thing has been perpetuated now, and that they were actually in favor of releasing the information as long as they are protected and their names are redacted. And so it sounded like they weren't saying don't release it, like Ghislaine Maxwell had said. So it'll be interesting to see because the letters were due today. So I'm assuming that ruling is going to be coming from the judge. The irony is that the person who keeps perpetuating this is Trump himself, because he keeps, dangling out there a pardon for Maxwell. And, well, I'm not really, sure. He keeps just perpetuating the story by not putting a kibosh on it. You and I both know that like this will go down as one of the greatest PR crisis media things ever.
What not to do.
Yes. Of what to do. So I don't know. I talked about it on CNN last night, of course, saying that we're lifting up the survivors. We've come a long way because the public's not demanding that they come forward. They just automatically believe them now, and they actually want accountability for the perpetrators, which is major progress. And the last thing I'll just say is that, of course, Trump could stop perpetuating this in a heartbeat because he could release all the other documents that have way more information than this grand jury testimony will ever have.
Yeah, I think what's interesting about this, and you were in CNN talking about this, I was on MSNBC talking about this, so we've kind of spread out across the cable news ecosystem, except for one network. But what I find fascinating about all of this is that in the midst of everybody politicizing this, you have Democrats smelling blood in the water, as they rightly should, because Trump is not releasing the files that he promised that he would. You've got Republicans who, until just a few months ago, if not a month ago, were gung-ho to release these Epstein files, now saying, there's nothing to see here, let's move on. We have to protect the survivors' names, and that's why we can't release them. Nobody is really talking much about the survivors. And the survivors themselves can't really go out there and talk because they rightly don't want to have their names out there, and they shouldn't. I mean, there's a way to release these files. There's a way to release these interviews. They're called 302s, without anybody's name being disclosed. It happens. I mean, it doesn't happen often, but it can happen. There's nothing that prevents that from happening. And not just names, but also, I think, identifying other information that would effectively identify who these women are. But nobody is really much focusing on these women who used to be girls, who I think you and I wrote about this in Time. We had an op-ed that came out in Time last week, and we had another great article in The Guardian today, or yesterday, I should say. But nobody is talking about the fact that these girls, who are now women, really don't owe any of us anything. We owe them something, which is to think about them and put them first. And I don't know that I've heard a lot of that, aside from what you and I have been talking about, much in any discussion of what's been happening on this issue.
Yeah. I've seen articles again, and I sort of feel like this is a little bit about what we've discussed before about the role of the media in this and how they can twist and turn and sort of continue to push out cultural wrongs, as far as how, like, Me Too's dead is one of them. But then also, publishing articles about and they keep calling them victims, which I know they were, but a cultural change would be to call them survivors.
Yep.
But the articles that seem to get to the top headlines are that that this continues to allow the survivors not to heal, and that instead of what we said in the Time op-ed, which was we should actually be celebrating them, because without them, we wouldn't be talking about this. And, it just brings us back to how important it is the way in which media frames these kinds of stories. Because speaking of perpetuating things, it continues to perpetuate that they're victims and that they're lesser than and that they're not as important. And when you call somebody a victim, that's sort of what you think of. And we've learned enough over the years that when you call them survivors, which is what they actually are, is that that's a positive. I mean, Beyonce wrote a whole song about being a survivor. So it kind of troubles me that the media kind of latches on to the victims feel horrible. I understand that, but we really should be looking at it from a more positive point of view, like we did in our op-ed, which is that they are the ones that make this story. And without them, we wouldn't be talking about it, and there would be no accountability for these perpetrators.
Yeah, and I think the other thing that you and I can talk about from personal experience as people who were sexually harassed, which I don't ever want to conflate with what happened to these women, because they were trafficked into basically sexual slavery as young girls. So I certainly have never even come close to having an experience like that. But still, somebody who, and you certainly were the first to do this in the Fox News era, somebody who came out very publicly against a very powerful, high-profile figure, as you and I both did when we sued Roger Ailes and Fox News respectively for sexual misconduct. There is power in taking back your voice, which is why we fight so hard to get rid of NDAs, which is why we fight so hard against silencing mechanisms like forced arbitration. But I think more relevantly, there is something to be said for the fact that as frightening as it is to stand up to power, and as frightening as it is to stand up to people who have had so much power over you for so many years, if not decades, that there is something to be said for holding them accountable. It's justice, right? That's what justice is about. And I think the part of all of this that's really just debilitating, I would think, is the same way that you and I always see men who we know were sexually, basically sexual miscreants, I don't know how else to describe it, being rehabilitated in the public sphere. In the same way that these women must look at Ghislaine Maxwell being moved from a prison where she was serving 20 years. And in the federal system, you have to serve 85% of your sentence before you could be eligible for parole. So she was going to be in there for, well over a decade. I mean, really over 15 years. But to see her now being moved to Club Fed, I don't know how to describe it, where she gets to do Pilates and yoga and all these other things at the hands of the United States government, the same government that really failed them the first time in not prosecuting Epstein back when the Southern District of Florida first filed its lawsuit. And then, of course, he got that sweetheart deal where he was allowed to continue to be a predator and continue to traffic and assault girls even after that. So, to the survivors who may be listening to this and are thinking, I give up, and how much more of this can I go through? I would simply say that I think speaking up, and I say this from personal experience, you have your voice. Nobody has taken that away from them, as frightening as it is, which is incredibly powerful. And if it's a voice that they choose to use and nobody's forcing them to do it, and frankly, I understand why they might not want to, but they do have their voice. And that is something that nobody can take away from them. And their voice, because of everything that's happened in the Me Too movement over the last decade and the fact that it is here to stay, holds much more weight than the voices of the people who engaged in really reprehensible behavior, including Ghislaine Maxwell, including the unknown men to whom these girls, now women, were trafficked. And I think that's something that's very important for survivors, whoever they are, whether it's Epstein or anybody else, to really understand that we are no longer, as you mentioned, Gretchen, living in a world where people are not believed, or it's a he said, she said situation. Survivors are believed, especially in a case this high profile. Nobody's going to say to them, oh, this can't possibly be true. You're making this up. I mean, I'm sure there will be people who, for political reasons, regardless of which side of the aisle some of these predators may be on, will say, oh, no, you're just doing this for political reasons. But the reality is over 80% of the people in this country support these survivors and want these facts out there.
Yeah, there was an interesting poll actually by Fox News yesterday that showed that only 1 in 5 are not paying attention to this case. The way they should have written that poll is that means 80% are paying attention to this case. I mean, that is a huge number. You and I know from doing polling for forever and ever and ever, or covering polls, nothing gets to 80%. I mean, hardly anything politically. And 66% or higher, 67% of Republicans were upset with the way it's being handled. That's huge. 56% of MAGA. Look, if it comes out, and so far there've been no accusations, and so I want to be clear about that. If it comes out that Trump had anything to do that was nefarious in any of this, MAGA's not going to believe it. Okay, they're not. But I agree with everything you said about how the pendulum has swung to the power of the people. Let's talk a little bit, though, about this transfer of Maxwell to that prison, because I spoke about this last night, too, on TV. I'm very worried about what that means about what the next shoe is to drop while Congress is out on recess. Because what is Trump going to actually do while they're not there? I worry that he will issue some sort of a pardon before they come back in September. And that would basically just... I mean, why would they have to have any? Well, first of all, I don't even agree with Congress having hearings with Maxwell, because we know she's going to lie.
She's going to say whatever she needs, of course.
Yeah, and so that's going to be, look, that's just a cover to put out words out there, probably that Trump had nothing to do with anything. But so that's that. I don't agree with Congress doing any of that. But I worry about this time period when they're on recess. And it was pretty obvious, unless you're a moron, to see that after Todd Blanche, his lawyer, went down there and spoke to her for 2 days, and then she was moved less than a week later. I mean, quid pro quo, anyone?
Well, I don't know if you know this, Gretchen. The Bureau of Prisons, which has the authority, first of all, they had to get a waiver to do this because this is completely against the guidelines. The Bureau of Prisons reports to the Attorney General, but actually the Bureau of Prisons directly on a day-to-day basis reports to the Deputy Attorney General. Who's the Deputy Attorney General? Todd Blanche. So, it's not even, the funny thing about this is it's just so out in the open. It's so out in the open. I actually don't agree with you necessarily that Congress being out of session is a bad thing, because for 2 reasons. One is Congress, it's not like Congress does anything to stand up to him anyway. But you do have members of Congress, some, not many, on the Republican side, going to town hall meetings. And you had one yesterday in Oklahoma where the member just got eviscerated over Epstein. Eviscerated. And if Trump pardons these members while they are, sorry, there goes my dog. If Trump pardons these members while they are, sorry, not these members, sorry, Trump pardons Maxwell while they're on parole. My son forgot his key, which means that he wants me to come down and open the door for him, which I'm not going to. But Trump, because she's on parole, because, oh my God.
You might have to.
I might have to go. Let me finish my thought real quickly, and then we'll have to wrap up. If Trump does this while they're all home on recess, they're going to hear it so much from their members that it's going to be a nightmare.
I know, but Trump's done this before. He dangled out their pardons for, Roger Stone and whatever his name was.
Not like this. Not like this.
Yeah, I just worry because, obviously Trump's very unpredictable. And as I've said, it would be an insurrection from all sides of the political fence if he gives her a pardon. But he's done things that nobody could predict. So we will have to stay tuned. All right. You need to go open the door.
I need to go answer the door. Yes, Oasis 927. You're so right. I do have to answer the door because I have a 13-year-old who apparently forgot his keys. Gotta go.
All right. See you guys later.
Bye.